Okay, you all look a bit apprehensive. A bit worried about getting your inbox to zero. So, welcome back. Just to let you know, Brendan put out some handouts that we'll be talking through in a few minutes. If you don't have one, there should be enough for one for each of you on the table. If your table is short, stick your hand up. Brendan's got some spares down the back. He'll make sure that everyone has one. But there's no need to do anything with that now. We'll be talking about that in a few minutes. So, Brendan, I think we need some more here as well. Second table from the front. Okay, so we've talked about the idea of setting up Outlook to be a central action management system. All of your meetings go into your calendar in Outlook, and all of your tasks go into the task list in Outlook. Now, most of you are familiar with how to schedule a meeting, but you might not know how easy it is to schedule a task. So I'm just going to show you this view, this daily view here. Your setup guide will show you how to set this up, okay? So just assume that you've set this up, then you need to start using it. So imagine that I'm at my desk and I think of something that I need to do. It's very quick to just go into my daily view in Outlook, double click in this space here, this little white space that says type a new task. If you double click there, it opens up a new task, and there's only 3 things you need to do. First of all, you need to fill in what it is that you need to do. And what I suggest is always start with an action word. Make your task action focused. And it will focus your mind a lot more on what you need to do. The second thing you need to think about is, when am I going to do that? Now, this is a really important consideration. Most people's to-do lists are just really elaborate piles. You might write out a to-do list every week in your notepad, but it's just a big pile of stuff you need to get done. You're still not asking yourself the question, when am I going to do it? So what I want you to do is to just roughly schedule the start date of the task. Think about, okay, when am I going to attempt to try to do this piece of work, and set the start date for that date. You'll find the due date immediately fills itself in for the same date. And if you want to, you can always set a separate due date and do that sort of stuff. The third thing I recommend is prioritizing the task. Now, Microsoft Outlook gives you 3 priorities, high, normal, and low. I only use 2 of them. As far as I'm concerned, if something is a low priority, it does not deserve to make it into my list to begin with. Don't dilute your task list with low priority stuff. And I might just pause here for a second. Let me just save this and explain why. I was doing some coaching with a senior manager in the Commonwealth Bank a little while ago, and she had thousands of emails in her inbox. She was very keen to get her inbox under control because it was stressing her out, and she got her inbox to 0. She actually sent me an email that Friday with a screenshot of her empty inbox, and she was so proud of herself. 2 weeks later, I came back in for another coaching session, and she was completely deflated. Now, her inbox was still at 0. She was still keeping that habit up. But what happened was her task list had begun to roll and stack and turn red, and she had about 50 red tasks in her task list. And she said, I've just moved the problem from my inbox into my task list. Peter was telling me during the break, same thing happened to you. It happens to so many people. Now, a part of her problem was she wasn't proactively managing her priorities and rescheduling things as she should have been doing. But another part of the problem was this. She had diluted her task list with all this low-value stuff. You see, a part of her problem in her inbox was there was a whole lot of industry reading that she kind of thought, oh yeah, I'd like to read that. That looks interesting. But it wasn't really a priority. And what she did was she turned all those emails into tasks. So she diluted her task list with this stuff that wasn't really a priority. So what we needed to do was look at a different strategy for her to manage things like reading and lower priority stuff. Don't put meetings into your calendar that you're not actually going to go to. And don't put tasks into your task list that are not a priority. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you start using this. For that reason, I only use high and normal priority. And notice that 2 2 of the tasks in my daily plan are a blue color. And that's because a part of the setup guide suggests that what you do is you set up a rule in Outlook that says, when I schedule a task and I make it a high priority, make it stand out by changing color. That's a really useful little function in Outlook. So your setup guide will show you how to do that. And what that does for me, it helps me to see in my day what is non-negotiable versus what is negotiable. What is a must-do priority versus what's a nice-to-do priority. That creates light and shade in my task list, and it helps me to prioritize. So there's some cool functionality that we've taken advantage of in Outlook to apply the principles that I'm talking about today. So that is one of the things that will help you to organize your priorities. What about if an email comes from, a task is driven by an email? There's actually 3 ways that I want to talk through creating a task from an email. Now, I showed you a cool button that I used before the break. I'll come back to that. But there's 3 other ways that you can turn an email into a task very quickly. The first strategy is to simply left-click and drag the email onto your task folder in the navigation bar. I'll demonstrate this in a second. Now, when you left-click and drag an email onto your task folder, what it does is it simply copies the text of that email into the task. It doesn't move the email, it doesn't bring the actual email itself, it just copies the text. The second option is to right-click and drag an email to your task folder. And when you right-click, now I just want to be really clear here. Okay, the first one was left-click. This is the left-click button. The second one was right-click. I've been teaching this stuff for a long time. And the amount of times I've said to someone, right-click and drag it, and they say, no, it doesn't work. And I say, no, you need to right-click. And they say, no, I am right-clicking. It doesn't work. And I say, no, you need to right-click. And they go, oh, you mean the right-click button? And I'm Irish? Okay. So you right-click and drag. And when you right-click and drag, what it gives you, it's hard to see the detail here, it gives you the option to copy or move the entire email into a task. Again, I'll demonstrate that in a second. The third option for inserting an item into a task is to actually open the task up. And I'm going to show you how you can actually pull an email into a task. Now, of course, you could do this with an appointment in your calendar. Let's say you've got a meeting and someone sends you the agenda for the meeting. You could pull that email into the appointment in your calendar. The idea is have the information at your fingertips when you need it. So let me just go and demonstrate how to do these 3 things. So, going back to Outlook, into my inbox. The first strategy is a left-click and drag. And if I left-click and drag this onto my task folder and drop it there, can you see how quickly it just copied the details of that email straight into a task? But it doesn't bring the email itself, it just copies text. If you right-click and drag, it will give you a menu to choose from. I can choose copy here as a task with an attachment, or I can choose move here. Now, normally I will choose copy here, because what that will do is it'll copy the email straight into the task, and that then allows me to file the original email into my filing system if I need to. So right-clicking gives you those different options. The third option I showed you there was, I've already got something linked to this task. I want to add another email. Open the task, go to Insert on the ribbon toolbar, choose Outlook Item, and it will open up your inbox. And now all I need to do is choose the relevant email, press OK, and it copies it into my task. So the workbook that I send through to you all, it documents all of those things with pictures, very easy to follow, okay? So don't worry about the detail of it too much. I just want you to get a sense that it's really easy to create actions from items in your inbox. So that then brings me up to getting your inbox under control. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how you manage your inputs. I reckon there are 3 types of emails that you guys receive. There are action emails, there are information emails, and then there's junk. Now I reckon you could subdivide each of those. With the action emails, some of those emails are urgent and they need your instant attention. And some could be done later. It's the ones that need to be done later that you tend to leave in your inbox and mark unread. So they're the ones you should be turning into tasks. And of course, if an email is urgent, deal with it immediately. But I do want you to think about whether it's really urgent or whether you're just reacting in an addictive way to your inbox. They have shown that when we get an email, a chemical gets released in our brain that is the same chemical that gets released when you gamble. So you sitting at your inbox all day long is like sitting at the pokies, putting coins in, and you're getting a little buzz in your brain. Don't get addicted to it. The second category of emails, informational emails, I reckon you could break into relevant and irrelevant. So the stuff that we receive into our inbox, it doesn't actually need any action. It might be reading material, it might be reports that you get. You often don't need to do anything with them. Sometimes you need to read them or be aware of them, but they're probably not worth turning into tasks. So we need to have a look at how do we deal with those in a meaningful way. I'm going to give you some strategies around that. But believe me, when it comes to informational emails, only some of them are relevant. A lot of them are irrelevant. You are on newsletter lists that you never read. You are receiving internal emails that actually don't apply to you because people use distribution lists. They CC you on stuff. And often when they CC you on stuff, it's for their benefit, not for yours. So you need to have a think about the level of informational stuff that is coming into your inbox that you can't possibly get to. And then there's junk. And I reckon that there's solicited junk and there's unsolicited junk. So spam and all of those emails trying to get you to invest $1 million in some Nigerian scam, that would be unsolicited, I'm sure. But there is also solicited stuff. So you sign up for a newsletter that you never read, or you buy something online and suddenly you're getting these emails, which is not exactly spam, but it is noise. You see, I reckon that this top group, the top 3, are needed by you. The bottom 3 are just noise. And the first strategy to managing your inbox effectively is to reduce the noise. This is my favorite image. 3 strategies for reducing noise in your inbox. Number 1, turn off your email alerts. Who's got bings, bangs, or bongs going off when they receive an email? Or if it's not an audible one, who's got a visual sliding pane that comes across the screen to say you've just received an email? If you have those turned on, your setup guide is going to show you how to turn them off. And I recommend that you go cold turkey. You turn off all of your email alerts. You do not need to know when an email comes in. They did a piece of research on this in the UK 2 years ago. They took 3 groups of people. They put one group of people into a room. They gave them a computer, gave them a complex piece of work to work on, and they left them to it. Second group of people they put into a different room, gave them the same task on a computer, but this time they peppered them with email alerts all day long. And then the third group of people, they put them into a separate room, gave them the same task to do, no email alerts, but they did give them a big bag of marijuana and they told them to get stoned. This all in the name of science. Now what they found was group number 1 were the most productive. Group number 3 were the second most productive. And group number 2 were the least productive. The people who are being constantly interrupted by email alerts were less productive than people who are stoned out of their heads over here. It's scary. What happens is when you're constantly reacting to these interruptions, your IQ drops. And they found that when you're being interrupted by emails, your IQ drops temporarily by 15 percentage points. When you are stoned, your IQ drops by 10 percentage points. Now, I am not recommending drugs in the workplace, and don't take me the wrong way, Peter. But turn off your alerts. You don't need them on. Go and check your emails at regular times throughout the day. I will check my email thoroughly for 30 minutes twice a day. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. And then outside of those 2 processing times, I check my email quickly, 5 minutes, about once an hour. So I'm usually going into my inbox about once an hour. The rest of the time, what I'm snapping back to is my daily plan, where my priorities sit. Now, that's a reasonable cadence when it comes to managing incoming work, I reckon. If anything is more urgent than that, my advice is tell the people around you to pick up the phone or come and walk over to your desk if it's that urgent. Don't send me an email and expect me to be looking at my inbox all day long, just in case you've got something urgent you want to communicate to me. Does that seem reasonable? We just need to reset some of the habits that we've all created and gotten used to, and we kind of say, well, that's just the way it is around here. There's lots of interruptions. It doesn't have to be that way if we're smart about it. So turn off your email alerts. The second strategy when it comes to reducing noise is junk the junk. If you are getting junk emails into your inbox, if you are receiving emails that you never read, that are just advertising emails, that are even things like CCs, if you're at a very senior level and you're getting CCs that are just not relevant to you, you've got to deal with that stuff in a different way. So I'm going to show you how to junk the junk when I go into Outlook in a second, but I will just talk about the third strategy as well. Batch emails using rules. Now, I wouldn't do this for every email, but there are certain emails where it's really useful to maybe set up a folder and automatically divert those emails into that folder using a rule. So for instance, I subscribe to probably about a dozen newsletters that are useful to me. They're about productivity. I find them useful. But they are not priorities. When they arrive in, I don't have time to read them. What I want to do is I want to batch my reading together in a reading folder. And I don't even want to see them in my inbox. I want them to just automatically get diverted. So to do that, first of all, let's look at junking the junk. Okay, if you get emails like this is junk, I don't want to receive this, it's really just spam, I could go and unsubscribe from that, but to be honest, it would probably take me 10 minutes to unsubscribe from it. Or I could do this. I'm simply going to highlight the email, I'm going to go up to the junk button in my toolbar, and I'm going to say block sender. In future, those emails will automatically get put into a folder called junk email. It's a system folder. And I've just said in future when that email arrives, just junk it. Now, over time, a whole lot of emails build up on my junk email folder, but probably about once every couple of weeks, I will right-click on my junk email folder and I will choose empty folder, and it will completely clear that folder out. So don't waste time with this stuff, but I reckon that you need to spot the junk a bit like you need to weed your garden. When you walk out into your front lawn and you spot a weed, pull it out. Because if you don't, suddenly you've got hundreds of weeds in your garden. Same with these emails. They're insidious. They suddenly take over, and all of a sudden we're getting 150, 200 emails a day, but so much of it is just junk. You don't have time for that, so junk it quickly if you can. This is my reading folder. So with newsletters, what I tend to do is, if I've got a newsletter coming into my inbox, and let me just choose this one here, I do want to receive that, don't have time to read it when it comes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on that email, I'm going to go down to Rules, and I'm going to choose Create Rule. Now what this will allow me to do is to set up a simple rule based on this specific email. And what I'm going to say is, whenever I receive an email from this email address, automatically move it into the following folder. I go and choose my reading folder from the list, and in future those emails will just get put into that folder. So it's a really useful strategy for reading. It's also a useful strategy for reports that you might get, but you don't need to action them straight away. You might just want to have them batched together in that one folder, and once or twice a week or even once a day you go in and you deal with those. It's a batching strategy that is far more effective than turning every one of those into an email or into a task. That would be too much. Does that make sense? This all helps to reduce the noise in your inbox. So, and sorry, one last one on that when it comes to noise. If you do get a high volume of CC emails, some senior executives I work with will use a CC folder. They'll have a folder set up, and they'll set up a rule that says whenever I get CC'd in on something, move it into my CC folder, except if it comes from this person, or this person, then I still want to see it in my inbox. So you can set up clever rules that will help you to manage that, and it kind of becomes like a second inbox that you review when you've got time, rather than the stuff that's sent directly to you that has actions in it for you, you review on a regular basis, like every day or several times a day. But that's not for everyone, and I'm not suggesting that you all set up a CC rule. That can be dangerous because you can miss things. Okay. The next principle I want to talk about is probably the thing that I am most passionate about when it comes to email management. The idea of keep it simple. So, show of hands here. Who keeps emails? Okay, most of you keep emails. Good. Why do you keep emails? What's the point? Okay. Couldn't understand the word he said, but I'm guessing that some of you said because we need to refer back to them, and some of you said just in case, and some of you said I want to cover my backside and make sure that I can prove that they sent this or I sent that. We keep lots of emails for lots of reasons, but would you agree that most of the time it's just in case? Just in case I ever need that again. Like, my assumption is if I'm going to file an email, it's finished with, and I'm keeping it just in case I ever need it again. If I need to action it, it goes into my task list or it goes into my calendar. So we all need to keep emails, but what I'm interested in is how you keep emails. Because my experience is most of us overcomplicate our filing systems, and that's why we need to keep them simple. So, out of all the emails that you keep on a yearly basis, you will only ever go back and refer to less than 5% of those emails. 5%. Now, what that says to me is 95% of the emails that you keep are a complete waste of your time. So why don't you just keep the 5%? We don't know which 5% we're going to need. That's the problem. So we tend to keep all these emails just in case, but I want you to see that so many of the emails that you keep you will never ever need again. So the trick here is we need to streamline our filing systems. IBM, the computer company, did some research on this a few years ago. What they found was there's basically two types of filing system in most organizations. There was one group of people that they called the keepers who had complex filing systems that looked like this. Lots of keepers out here, I bet you. At the other end of the spectrum were what they called the finders. And the finders tended to just have one filing folder. I'm a finder. I have one filing folder called filing. Very creative. Now, here's what I'm going to suggest. In my experience, most people are keepers. We tend to set up folder-driven, hierarchical systems to help us to organize our emails. And the only reason we do that is because we think it's going to help us to find those emails more easily. It doesn't. What IBM found was when it came to finding emails, it took the keepers an average of 58 seconds to find an email in their complicated system versus just 17 seconds for the finders in their one filing folder system. It is 3 times quicker to find things in one folder than it is across many. And the reason is this system is no longer relevant in the modern workplace. The future is now. But you are still using methodology that was relevant 20 years ago when most of what we had to file and find were papers. You see, back then we needed filing cabinets with hanging folders and manila files and labels, and we had to put everything into the right place, otherwise we wouldn't be able to find anything. But that's all changed now. The Dewey Decimal System was a system designed to help librarians to organize books in big libraries. Complicated libraries with millions of books sometimes. Even the Dewey Decimal System is no longer relevant anymore. You go into a large library, and I'm talking about the New York state-of-the-art library. What happens now is you walk in, you're given a computer terminal. You type in the name of the book, and in the background, a robot goes zzz, finds the book, and it brings it back to you. Do you get that that robot is a search? And Microsoft Outlook has possibly the most powerful search functions built into it, and yet in my experience, most people haven't a clue how to use them. So I'm going to show you a few tricks here. It's going to be another sexy moment. You're going to go, ooh. But if you get your head around this, it will completely change how you manage your information. Now, before I go in and show you this, can I just say that there is a middle group? There is another strategy here. You've got the keepers and you've got the finders. The middle group are what I call the losers and the weepers. So it was finders, keepers, losers, weepers. I thought that had to be the middle group. So if you're a loser and you do really need to have folders, what I'm going to suggest is 10 folders or less. Okay? Because I find that people are so wedded to their filing systems, they don't want to change them. They say, no, I don't want to change because I know where everything is and it all works, and they'll have every excuse why it's better, but it wastes time. So I am going to give you a bit of an out. If you feel that you couldn't possibly go to one filing folder, then what I'm going to ask you to do is maybe consolidate your filing system down to 10 core folders or less. What I tend to say is 10 folders is good, 5 is better, but 1 is best. So I really want you to change your paradigm around this. Now let me show you how I'm going to find an email in Outlook in my one filing folder. I have 4,648 emails in that folder, so a lot of emails. Now, you all know how to search. Can I just check in? Who searches in their sent items for stuff on a regular basis? Okay. Now, just check in with your thinking here. That's one folder with lots of emails in it. Just saying. Just saying. So, I've got one folder with lots of emails that I've received in it called my filing folder. So for me, filing is just a quick decision. Do I need to keep this email or not? If I don't need to keep it, I delete it. If I do need to keep it, I file it. And filing it is easy because I just need to drag it into one folder. I don't need to think about it. In fact, you remember the way I turned an email into a task first up this morning or this afternoon was to use a button up in my toolbar called Task and File. I've set up that quick step. And again, your setup guide will show you how to do this. I've set up the quick step to both turn the email into a task and file it into my filing system, and I can do that easily because I've only got one filing folder. I've just directed that quick step to, when I press this button, create a task and attach the email, and then move the email into my filing folder. So it's really quick and easy. So filing is just a quick decision I need to make. How do I find things? So I'm going to talk through a strategy for finding stuff that I call triangulation. So, you know the way in the old-fashioned cop shows, they would have the baddie on the phone and they tried to keep them on the phone for long enough to be able to trace the call? Well, nowadays on CSI, it's all mobile phones, but they can still trace the call and they use satellites to do it. So when the first satellite is able to lock onto the mobile phone, they know vaguely where that person is. When the second satellite locks on, they're getting close. But when a third satellite locks on, they triangulate and they're able to tell where that person is down to a couple of square meters. I use a similar strategy to find emails in my filing folder, and I can find things like this. So, I'm going to go into my filing folder, and let's say I need to find an email from one of my team, Tony Hall. I get a lot of emails from Tony. And he sent me an email a couple of months ago that's related to a Commonwealth Bank invoice. And all I can remember about it is it probably mentions Commonwealth Bank and it has a PDF document attached to it. So I'm going to go to my search box. Now notice that when I click in the search box, my ribbon toolbar turns into a search toolbar. There's all these buttons that are relevant to searching. This is really useful. Most people never even notice it. Now, the really useful part of it is something called the refine pane. This is going to help me to triangulate and find my email. So I'm going to do my search by first of all clicking on the from button, and I'm going to type in the person's name. So in this case, his name is Hall. It brings up instantly 188 emails, too many. So that's my first triangulation. My second one is I'm going to click on the subject button, and I'm going to say, only show me the emails from Tony Hall that have CBA in the subject. It narrows my search down to 25 emails. I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to say, only show me the ones that have attached documents. It narrows my search down to 7 emails. Ooh. This is really, really powerful. I've just been able to go zoom, 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 and find exactly what I'm looking for. But what you guys are doing is, you're putting stuff into 57 different folders, hoping that they're going to help you to find what you want, but it doesn't. Because you ever file an email into a folder and 3 months later you go to find it and it's not in the folder you thought you would have put it in, so you end up searching through all these other folders. Or do you ever drag an email into the wrong folder? Or do you ever drag a folder onto another folder and then use the whole bloody folder? And this is when 95% of the time you're never going to need the email again, and you're wasting all this time. Get good at searching. Simplify your filing system. Get it down to a small number of folders. And as Einstein once said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. One folder is as simple as possible. Now, I had a coaching session this morning with someone from the Commonwealth Bank, just a telephone call to check in how they were going. And she said to me, this is fantastic. 6 months since she's been through my training. She said, I went down to 10 folders. I'm now down to 3, and I think I'm just going to go to 1. Now, the only thing that had changed for her in that time was as her confidence searching got better, her need for folders got less. So maybe you start off with 10 folders, but you might go down to 1 over time. Maybe you'll just go for it and go to 1 folder. But simplify if you possibly can. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is actually getting to zero and processing your emails. We're going to use a concept. This is where your handout on your desk will come into play. Processing emails is all about making decisions. And there are only 4 decisions you can make about any email. They all begin with D. You can either dump it, divert it, decide when, or do it now. And this flowchart is designed to guide you through the questioning process to get your emails all the way to zero. So when I look at an email, the first question I ask myself is there any action needed with this? If the answer is no, I dump it. And that means that I either delete it or I file it, but I get rid of it from my inbox. If the answer is yes, some action is needed, the next question is, well, is it a good use of my time? If the answer is no, I will divert it away from myself, and that usually means that I'll either delegate it to the appropriate person, or sometimes I'll push back and negotiate. And where that becomes relevant is, if someone's inviting you to a meeting and a meeting invite comes into your inbox, if you don't think that meeting is the best use of your time, sometimes you need to push back and say, sorry, I'm not the right person. I don't think I add any value to that. Or sometimes you need to negotiate when that meeting's going to happen. But don't just let work come into your schedule blindly. You need to make decisions about what is a good use of your time. If it does go through to the next question, then the next question is, well, does it need my immediate attention if I am going to do it? If the answer is no, we decide when, and that's when you either turn it into a task or you schedule it into your calendar. And we've set up this action management system to manage that stuff. And then the final one is, do it now. So if it is urgent, and you do need to do it immediately, it's a do it now. Now, you have to end up at zero if you follow that progression through to its logical end. It's really simple. It's really easy. I would apply the 2-minute rule and do it quickly if you can. So when you are checking your email, if you can just deal with an email, get it out of the way. Do not take these little emails and turn them into little tasks just so you can tick them complete. That's not what I'm suggesting. So do it quickly if you can. And also, once you've actioned an email, you may need to file or delete the original email to clear it from your inbox. So for instance, that's why when I copy an email into a task, I will then file the original email into my filing system because I don't need it in my inbox anymore because my task this is going to remind me to do it. So, show of hands, who kind of likes the idea of getting to zero, but they've got a bit of a mountain to climb? They've got lots of emails in their inbox because this can be a barrier sometimes. Some people say, look, I'd love to get to zero, but to be honest, I've got so many emails in my inbox, it's probably going to take me 3 weeks to get to zero. What I'm going to suggest you do in that situation is apply the Mount Rushmore approach. Presidents' heads carved into the mountainside in the US, they did not use chisels alone to carve those heads. What they did was a 3-stage process. They first of all trucked in a whole lot of dynamite and they blew whole chunks away from the cliff face. They then got workmen in with sledgehammers to carve rough shapes, and then they got the artisans in with the chisels to do the fine detail work. So, if you've got thousands of emails in your inbox, what I want you to do is don't make excuses. I want you to use the Mount Rushmore approach, and that means you go back a month, and anything older than a month in your inbox, you highlight and you just file it into your filing system because that is all that it is. It's just filing in your inbox. Move on with your life and file it into your filing system. That's the dynamite approach. Believe me, anything older than a month in your inbox, you've already done it. It never needed action in the first place, or it's gone past its use-by date. Move on. Now, what is left in your inbox, a month's worth of emails, use the sledgehammer approach next by sorting your emails by the from field, and that will group your emails together by person, and you'll be able to get rid of whole groups of emails because you'll be able to delete everything from Peter. Actually, no, set up a rule to automatically delete stuff from Peter. That would be a better idea. You can delete whole groups of emails or file whole groups of emails that you know you don't need to deal with. What is left in your inbox, then run those through the 4 Ds. And I challenge any of you not to be able to get to zero within a couple of hours if you apply that approach. The worst inbox I've ever come across had 72,000 emails in it. We got him to zero in 2 hours. So no excuses. Give it a go. When you get to zero, you will find that a weight is lifted off your shoulders because mentally, the research shows that when you've got more than 50 emails in your inbox, your stress levels begin to rise. Whether you know it or not, that is happening. Getting to zero is a really healthy thing to do. But here's the thing. You don't have to get to zero every day. I don't. Once a week, I get to zero. Once a week. So my emails will fluctuate as I go through the week, but once a week I force myself all the way to zero. And that keeps me mentally sane when it comes to my inbox. And what it also does is it gets my head out of my inbox and gets it over here. So, the final thing I want to talk about is this. When it comes to the really meaningful work that you should be doing, where are you spending your time? Are you doing the bad work? Or are you doing the good work? So what do you want to be spending your time doing? So most people will put their hand up and say, yeah, I want to be doing good work. But here's the news. I don't want you to be doing good work. I want you to be doing the great work. And to get to the great work, you need to be organized. You see, the bad work is what I call busy work. Those emails in your inbox, some of them are good, but some of them are bad because they're just noise. So let's not waste time on the noise. Let's try and minimize the amount of stuff that we're doing down here. The good work is what I call business as usual. That's just doing your job. But at the end of the day, You don't want your performance plan to say that you met requirements, that you did your job, that you were satisfactory. That's not really going to, number one, achieve what we need to achieve in our roles. And number two, it's not going to give us motivation. You see, we don't get motivation from this. We get motivation from doing the great work, which is what I call the breakthrough work in your role. I want you all to think about something in your role that you've been meaning to get to over the last couple of months, and you haven't been able to get your head around it yet because you've been so busy doing this stuff here. A guy called Michael Bungay Steiner wrote a book called Do More Great Work, and the argument he makes is this. The enemy of great work is not bad work, it's good work. It's spending too much of our time doing the business as usual stuff and then saying, well, that's my job. I think we need to do more. I definitely think we need to be doing this, but I want you to carve out some of your time to do the really meaningful stuff. And I reckon that the real trick to doing this is spending some of your time planning. And my experience is this. We do a whole heap of planning. You guys are here planning today. You probably do organizational planning. You do team planning. It's coming out your ears. But it stops when it comes to personal planning. I read an article in the Sydney Morning Herald last week which said that Accenture, the largest consulting firm in the world, has just stopped doing performance planning. They've thrown the whole system out the window because they realized that it wasn't actually helping people to achieve what they needed to achieve. Now, I don't really have a strong view about whether performance planning works or not, but I do know this, that it only goes so far. You can put all the performance planning in place that you like, but if people aren't going the final mile and doing some personal planning, then you're never going to get your head up doing the important stuff up here. So I reckon the personal planning that will benefit you the most is a weekly planning process that I talk about that I call ROAR. ROAR stands for Review, Organize, Anticipate, and Realign. So each week I spend somewhere between 15 and 45 minutes planning my week and going through the ROAR process. This is what I call four-dimensional planning. You see, I'm sure if I asked you to put your hands up, who plans the week, most of you will probably put your hand up and say, yeah, I look at my meetings for next week and I get my head around what's coming up to a certain degree. But I reckon that most of us just plan in a one-dimensional way. We need to be planning in the four-dimensional way. And the way ROAR plays out is like this. I do my weekly planning on a Friday morning usually. That's a time that suits me. It is movable, but generally speaking, I'm in the office on a Friday. And I reckon that Monday, your week's already begun too late. And Friday afternoon, yeah, I'm thinking about lining those pints of Guinness up, so, that doesn't work for me. So Friday morning is a good time for me to do weekly planning. When I do my weekly ROAR, what I will first of all do is I will look back at the week that has just gone, I'll review it, and I'll bring myself completely up to date. 3 key things that I do here. Number 1, I make sure that all of my meeting actions from my meetings this week have made it into my system or been delegated to the appropriate people. Number 2, I make sure that my task list is up to date. So if I have had tasks that have rolled forward, I reallocate them, I reschedule them to the appropriate dates next week or whenever. And then number 3, this is when I get my inbox down to 0. So what I'm trying to do here is make visible everything that requires my time and attention. Once I've done that, I then look at next week, the coming week, and I organize next week. I think about my meetings for next week. I make sure they're all a good use of my time. I make sure that I'm prepared for all of them. And if I'm not, I block out time in my calendar or I schedule a task in my task list to prepare for those meetings. And number 3, I look at my task list for the week. You can't really see the detail here, but I open up that daily task view and I just make sure that I've got a reasonable work balance in place. Then I look forward 4 to 6 weeks in advance and I anticipate what's coming down the track at me. I think about what are some of the events that are coming up, what are some of the major deadlines coming up, and what is some of the travel that I've got coming up. And what I'm trying to do here is simply schedule back here what needs to be done now to be organized for those things. It's not rocket science. But often what we do is we have our head buried in the here and now, and we don't actually stop and look up and anticipate what's coming down the track at us. The final piece of ROAR is I realign. I think about my goals and objectives. I think about my roles, and I think about my projects. And I ask myself the question, what are some of the things that I need to be proactively scheduling into my system to make sure that I'm working on the right work? You see, it's not just what comes into my inbox that should drive my work. It's me too. I need to be thinking about the big picture, and I need to be proactively driving the right stuff into my system. Does that make sense? This is a very robust process. One of the resources that we're going to send to you is a checklist of questions that you can be asking yourself in your weekly ROAR meeting with yourself. I'm going to suggest that you schedule in time. It doesn't have to be on Friday, but once a week, have some time put aside to plan your week. If you've got an executive assistant, like Peter would have, you do it with them, because both of you need to be across this. But it's well worth taking time out to do it. The problem is, most of us are too busy to plan. That's a bit like driving from here to Melbourne and saying that, I know it's a long way to go, but I don't have time to stop and get petrol, so I'm just going to drive. It's not going to work, okay? Taking time out to plan is a really necessary thing to do. Okay, so a few things you need to think about there. To wrap up, there are 3 key messages that I want you to take away and action and do differently. The first is centralize everything into one place. So sometime over the next week, I want you to electrify your task list. Get it into Outlook. Get Outlook set up and get your tasks in there and start managing them alongside your calendar. The second key thing you need to think about is get your inbox to 0. That's what I call a behavior changer. It's a habit that actually has a knock-on effect to lots of other habits in your life. So do that. Get to 0 once. But then what I want you to do is get to 0 4 times over the next 4 weeks. If you can do that 4 times, I guarantee you, you've got a habit that is now beginning to build. And then the third thing is, I want you to schedule time in for the weekly ROAR. Schedule it into your calendar and use the checklist to plan your week, and just see if it isn't a better week, if it isn't a more effective week, a more efficient week, and a more proactive week. Thank you all very much.